I had never been so humiliated in my life. And the worst part, I smiled through it. It was supposed to be a special night, my son's engagement party. Daniel had asked me weeks ago if I could help a little with setup. I said yes without hesitation. Of course I did. I'd do anything for him. I thought that meant arranging flowers, maybe plating hors d'oeuvres. I didn't think it meant wearing a uniform. When I arrived at the venue, a country club so polished, it made my thrift store shoes blush. I found Emily's mother, waiting by the kitchen entrance. She handed me a black button-up shirt slacks and a plain apron. No greeting, no hug. "We had a few staff cancel last minute," she said briskly. "It would be great if you could step in. You know how to carry trays, right?" I blinked. "You want me to serve?" She smiled like she was doing me a favor. "You're so good with people. Just until the catering team settles. We need someone trustworthy." My mouth went dry. I stared down at the uniform, then back at her. Daniel wasn't there yet. Emily came around the corner a moment later, all gloss and designer heels. "Hi," she said, kissing the air beside my cheek. Then she saw the outfit in my hands. "Oh, great. Thanks so much for helping Ellen. It really means a lot." My heart thudded against my ribs. I wanted to say no. I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind them that I was the mother of the groom, not a member of the waitstaff. But instead, I nodded. "Of course," I whispered. I walked into the bathroom and changed, stared at myself in the mirror under fluorescent lights. I looked like every tired cafeteria worker I'd ever stood beside for the past 25 years. Apron-tied sleeves, rolled-up hair pinned back. Except this time, it wasn't my job. It was my punishment. An elegant punishment for not being enough, not rich enough, not polished enough, not them. I stepped out and joined the catering team. No one questioned me. I carried flutes of champagne through a crowd of laughing guests in cocktail dresses and polished shoes. Not one of them looked me in the eye. Until someone did. A woman older smiled kindly. "Oh, thank you, dear," she said, taking a glass. "You're doing a lovely job." I smiled. "Thank you." Then she tilted her head. "Forgive me, but you look familiar. Are you one of Emily's aunts?" I opened my mouth, but before I could answer, Emily stepped in beside me laughing. "Oh no," she said quickly. "She's just helping us tonight. Just helping." The woman nodded and walked away. Emily looked at me once more. "You're a lifesaver," she said. "Truly." And then she was gone back into the crowd, her laugh echoing against champagne flutes and white linen. I stood there with a tray in my hands, surrounded by the sound of crystal and casual cruelty. No one knew who I was. No one saw me. And yet, without me, the groom wouldn't exist. It wasn't the apron that stung. It was the way they handed it to me, like it had always belonged to me. Like I had never been anything else. After all, I'd worn uniforms my whole life. Cafeteria whites, cleaning smocks, discount store polos with name tags that curled at the corners. I'd grown used to being overlooked, but never by him. Never by Daniel. Raising Daniel was the only thing I've ever been proud of without needing a certificate, a promotion, or applause. He was mine. My reason. My only shot at proving that even when life falls apart, love can still hold something together. His father left before Daniel turned 3. Said he wasn't cut out for the whole dad thing. One suitcase, one last shrug, and the door clicked behind him. I didn't cry until Daniel asked, "When's Daddy coming back?" I told him, "We've still got each other." And we did. I worked in the school cafeteria during the day, cleaned motel rooms at night. Sometimes I'd get a third shift watching elderly patients so I could make rent. Sleep was a luxury. Hot meals were occasional, but Daniel always had enough. Because I made sure he did. He didn't wear the best clothes, but he never went without shoes. He didn't eat out, but his lunch was always packed with a note that said, "I love you, Peanut." He called me his hero once in 2nd grade, when he wrote about who he admired most. I still have that essay folded in a shoebox under my bed. Daniel was kind, soft-spoken, the kind of kid who held doors for strangers and hugged me every night, even when he got too tall to fit in my arms. Then came college. I emptied my savings to pay what scholarships didn't cover, took out loans, said no to new shoes, new furniture vacations. I worked double shifts through flu season and broken toes, all for one thing, so he wouldn't have to work like me. And it worked. He graduated with honors, got a job at a marketing firm in the city, started wearing tailored suits using words like networking and strategy. The calls got shorter. The visits became fewer. I told myself it was normal. He was busy. He was building his life. Then he met Emily. I'll never forget our first introduction. She was beautiful, polished, educated. Her laugh sounded rehearsed, but her smile reached her eyes. She shook my hand and called me Ms. Mitchell, even though I asked her to call me Ellen. From the start, I knew she came from money. Her father drove a new Mercedes. Her mother hosted charity luncheons and wore cashmere to grocery shop. But I didn't mind. I figured if Daniel loved her, I could learn to. But slowly, I started to vanish from the picture. First, it was little things. Not being invited to dinners because it's just work friends. Being told the engagement was happening over the holidays while I was working double shifts. Then came the phone call. Emily was planning the engagement party. It would be intimate, she said. Very curated. When I offered to bring one of Daniel's favorite dishes, my baked macaroni, she laughed gently and said, "Oh, how sweet. But we've hired a Michelin-trained chef." I should have known right then. I was being managed, repackaged, pushed to the edges of my own story. And then came the uniform. The day she handed me that apron, all the old echoes came rushing back. Every moment I swallowed pride to make room for his future. Every night I lay awake counting dollars, wondering how to stretch them further. Every tear I blinked away so he could smile instead. And in that moment, standing beside her in that upscale kitchen, I realized something. Daniel wasn't trying to erase me. He just stopped seeing me. Somewhere along the way, my son, the boy who once kissed my cracked hands and called them magic, had grown used to my sacrifice. He'd mistaken silence for consent. He had let someone dress me like the help at his own celebration, and never once asked if I was okay with it. And me, I let him. Because that's what mothers do. Sometimes we stay silent, thinking love means shrinking ourselves to let them grow. But that night, I didn't feel like shrinking anymore. As I walked past the glittering chandeliers and laughter balancing a silver tray of shrimp skewers, I saw faces of people I didn't recognize. Guests sipping champagne, comparing handbags, laughing at jokes about summer homes and stocks. And not one of them knew who I was. Not one of them saw me. Until a woman paused mid-sip and said, "Excuse me, do you know where the restroom is?" I smiled politely. "Around the corner to the left." She nodded. "Thank you. And great service tonight. You're doing an amazing job." I thanked her, and something strange happened. I felt proud. Not because of the compliment, but because I knew something none of them did. I had served my whole life, not just food, but love times sacrifice dignity. And while they mistook me for the help, I was the reason the groom existed. I thought the worst part of that night would be putting on the uniform. I was wrong. The worst part was seeing Daniel and realizing he wasn't going to stop it. When he arrived just before the party began, he looked handsome, grown. His navy suit fit like it was made for him, hair perfectly styled, shoes shining like mirrors. He walked in like he belonged in that room. And when he saw me standing by the champagne table in my black button-down and apron, he hesitated. For a second, I thought maybe he would pull me aside and say, "What the hell is going on?" But he didn't. He gave me a small, polite smile, the kind people give flight attendants or hotel clerks. "Hey, Mom," he said softly, eyes darting to make sure no one was looking too closely. "Hi, sweetheart," I answered. Then Emily came swooping in like a warm breeze, wrapped in satin. "Daniel!" she squealed, throwing her arms around his neck. Then when she noticed me, she gave me that polished smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. "Thanks again for stepping in," she whispered quickly before guiding Daniel toward the center of the room. And just like that, they disappeared into a sea of cocktails and curated music. I resumed my duties, circulating hors d'oeuvres, refilling glasses, pretending I didn't know the groom. pretending I hadn't raised him with everything I had. The first hour was a blur of polite nods, tight smiles, and aching feet. Then, something shifted. It started with a small group of women near the dessert table. I overheard one of them say, "She's so efficient. Did they hire a private server for the family?" Another whispered, "I think she's related. Didn't someone say she was the groom's mom?" There it was. The question, like a dropped match near dry grass. I kept moving, kept smiling, but I could feel eyes starting to follow me. Conversations softening when I passed by. Confusion blooming across carefully made-up faces. A man in his 60s, tall with a salt and pepper beard, finally stepped forward as I refreshed the drink station. "Pardon me," he said, his voice deep and polite. "I've just got to ask, are you Daniel's mother?" I froze. For a beat too long. Then I nodded. "Yes, I am." He blinked. "But you're working," I smiled gently. "Only tonight." He stared at me, eyebrows drawing together, in a way that told me he wasn't buying whatever story he'd been fed. "That doesn't make sense," he muttered. "That's the groom's mother." I gave a small shrug and walked away. But the spark had caught fire. Within minutes, people started asking questions. Whispers swept through the room like wind through tall grass. Did she just say she's the groom's mom? Why is she in a uniform? Was this intentional? I felt it happening around me, but I didn't look up. I just kept doing what I came to do, until a woman in a red silk dress, the same one who asked me for directions earlier, walked right up and said loud enough for half the room to hear, "Why is Daniel's mother serving drinks at his own engagement party?" The music didn't stop, but the energy in the room did. People paused, turned, looked. Emily, standing near the fireplace with her champagne, turned ghost white. Daniel, mid-conversation, glanced up, and this time his eyes locked with mine for longer than a heartbeat. There was no hiding now. The woman in red looked straight at me. "Is that true?" she asked. "You're his mother." I took a deep breath, then nodded. "Yes, I am." She looked at Daniel. "And you let her serve people tonight?" Daniel opened his mouth. "Closed it." Emily stepped forward quickly, voice shaking just enough to betray her poise. She offered to help. She insisted. That wasn't a lie. But it wasn't the truth either. I had offered to contribute, not to serve. There's a difference. Daniel's face went pale. The man with the salt and pepper beard, Emily's uncle I'd later learn, spoke up from behind me. "You let your mother wear an apron at your engagement party while her seat went to someone who barely knows you." Daniel looked at me again this time, with something raw in his expression, shame. Panic, maybe both. I didn't think he began. "That's the problem," I said softly. "You didn't." Now every eye in the room was on him, not me. Him. And that more than anything told me the tide was turning. I set the tray down on the bar. I untied my apron, slowly, carefully, as if I'd been waiting my entire life for this moment. Not out of drama, but out of clarity. I folded it once, then again, and placed it on the table. Then I walked toward the door, not to leave, but to finally step into the light that had always been mine. Daniel didn't stop me, not yet, but his silence said enough. And somewhere deep in that silence, I knew something was about to break. I didn't storm out. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice or demand an apology. I simply folded the apron and placed it on the bar, then walked toward the far end of the room where the glass doors opened onto the garden. If people moved, I didn't see them. If they whispered, I didn't hear. But I felt everything, every stare, every ounce of silence pressing against my back. And then, I heard my name. Mom. I stopped, turned. Daniel was walking toward me, his steps unsure, like he was still trying to convince himself he had the right to follow me. "Mom, wait. Please." I stood there, no tray, no apron, no performance. Just me. "Don't," I said softly. "Not unless you're ready to actually see me." He froze. The room was quiet now, everyone watching, like it was a play they hadn't paid for, but couldn't look away from. Emily stood to the side, pale, her hands clasped so tightly, her knuckles turned white. "I didn't mean for it to go like this," Daniel said, his voice breaking. I didn't know it would. You didn't want to know, I said, steady now. You thought if I stayed quiet and wore what they gave me, I'd just disappear into the background. But I never belonged in the background of your life, Daniel. He dropped his eyes. I took a step closer, not to shame him, but so he could feel the truth. I served people my whole life, and I never once minded. Not until tonight. Because tonight, you made me serve you. And not out of love. Out of embarrassment. He looked up, eyes shining. I was afraid she wouldn't understand you. She doesn't have to understand me, I said. She just has to respect me. Silence. Thick. Heavy. And then something unexpected happened. A voice spoke from the other side of the room. Son! It was the man from earlier, Emily's uncle. I've been in your shoes, he said calmly. Ashamed of where I came from. Tried to polish it away with suits and silence. Cost me my relationship with my own mother. Don't make the same mistake. Daniel's shoulders sagged like someone had removed the scaffolding holding him up. And then, slowly, he walked back toward the center of the room. Picked up the mic from the DJ's table. Tapped it gently. The room went still. I need to say something, he began. Actually, a few things. Emily stepped forward, whispering, Daniel, maybe we should do this later. He shook his head. No, we've done enough of later. He looked at me. And for the first time that night, he really looked. This woman, he said, is not the caterer. She's not the help. She's not someone who wandered in wearing the wrong clothes. He paused. She's my mother. A few gasps, a few heads bowed. No one moved. She raised me by herself, worked more jobs than I can count, packed my lunch with notes, stayed up through the night when I was sick, took out loans for my education without telling me. He glanced at Emily. She didn't wear pearls or host garden parties. She didn't come from money. But she gave me something none of you could have reason to stand up today and be the man I am. Then he turned back to me, his voice cracking. I didn't forget that. I just stopped saying it out loud. And that was my failure, not yours. I didn't realize I was crying until I felt the tears roll down my face. He walked toward me, gently took my hands. I'm sorry, Mom. I should have pulled out your chair, not handed you a tray. I should have introduced you as the woman who built my world, not the woman I let be used for the sake of appearances. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Because in that moment, he handed me back what had been taken, not just my seat at his table, but my dignity. The crowd didn't erupt into applause. There was no dramatic music cue, but people nodded, whispered. A few looked away in shame. Others looked at me like they were seeing me for the first time. Even Emily. Her expression had softened, like someone whose mirror had finally cracked. Daniel turned to the room. Tonight was supposed to be about love. But if it doesn't start with honoring the people who made us, what's the point? He stepped aside and gestured toward me. If anyone deserves to be standing up here with me, it's her. I took a breath, walked forward. Not because I needed a spotlight, but because for the first time, I wasn't hiding in the kitchen. That night, I didn't sit in the back. I stood beside my son. And while my dress wasn't designer and my shoes still had scuffs, I held my head higher than anyone else in that room. Not because I was better, but because I was enough. The next morning, I woke up sore, not from the heels or the trays, but from the emotional weight I'd carried in silence for far too long. I made my tea the same way I always do. Same chipped mug, same quiet kitchen. But everything felt different. Lighter. Not because the world had changed overnight, not because people had suddenly treated me better, but because I had finally stopped treating myself like an afterthought. The woman in the mirror was still the same. Same laugh lines, same graying hair, same tired eyes. But now, she stood straighter. I don't know if everyone at the party saw me that night. Some probably went home and gossiped about the scene. Others might not have cared at all. That's okay, because the one person who needed to see me finally did. Daniel called me later that day. His voice cracked before he even got through high. He said he hadn't slept. He said he couldn't believe he'd let it get that far. He asked me through tears if I still wanted to be part of the wedding. I laughed. Sweetheart, I told him I never stopped being part of your story. You just stopped reading my chapter. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Would you walk me in at the ceremony before Emily and I enter? I blinked. Like, walk you down the aisle? Yes. First. It took me a moment to answer. Then I said I'd be honored. A week later, Emily came by. Alone. She looked nervous, more human than I'd ever seen her. She sat at my kitchen table and fidgeted with her necklace, like it was a shield. I'm sorry, she said quietly. For everything. For the uniform. For the way I talked to you. For what I assumed. I didn't let her finish. I reached across the table and placed my hand on hers. You don't need to explain, Emily. You just need to grow. And she nodded. I'm trying. That's all I needed to hear. We didn't become best friends overnight. But we started something better, respect. And when the wedding day came, I didn't stand in the kitchen. I walked in through the front. Daniel met me at the doors, took my arm, and whispered, You look beautiful, Mom. And this time, I believed him. I know now that I will always serve. Because service isn't about aprons or uniforms. It's about showing up, loving quietly, standing in the gap. And that's not weakness, it's power. A power they didn't recognize at first, but they do now. And that's enough. Because I never needed a title, I just needed my place. And I have it now, not at the back of the room, not behind a tray, but beside the sun I raised with every breath in my body. Have you ever been asked to shrink yourself to fit someone else's idea of worthy? Have you ever served in silence and waited to be seen? You're not invisible. You are everything. Share your story. Let the world see the women it tries to overlook.